is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. We have a fantastic episode for you today. And as a reminder, we haven't mentioned it in a long time, if you shamefully, for some strange reason, don't get Day 41 magazine, our magazine that we send out for free, please go and sign up for that. It will keep you up to date on everything. Go to 40daysforlife.com/magazine. We have a lot of pro-life features in the movement and beyond. And so I promise you will never get tired of getting and reading that wonderful magazine. Somebody who I'm extremely tired of with his presence in general is my co-host, Mr. Steve Garland. Steve,
is it the face? Is that it?
It's a lot.
A lot of things?
Yeah, I don't think we have enough time, and because we have wonderful special guests, I don't want to get into your psychosis.
Many problems
that I have with you, because we have to be well-behaved today because we have Katie.
Yes, we did a 40 Days for Life leader training workshop in New England back in the fall. And one of our longtime leaders, whose name is Beth, was like, hey, you're from Wisconsin? I've got a friend from Wisconsin. Her name is Katie, and gave me a little bit of Katie's background as someone who was involved in the transgender movement and then detransition movement. And so we had the chance, since you live, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes or an hour from me, Katie, we had the opportunity to get together, my wife and you and your husband, who's sitting next to John the Baptist right now in studio. We got together for coffee and got to know you a little bit, learned your story, and learned that you're sharing your story, and thought that what a great opportunity it would be for us to have you share your story with our listeners. So thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you.
I think it's awesome, too, because what's happened, at least in my lifetime, and you've experienced it, is that I'm trying to think of the first time I heard the term transgender. Do you remember when the first time you even heard the term?
I can tell you exactly when and where I was. I was in college. It was by the elevator in the dorms, and it had the LGBT. And I remember knowing what LGB was. I did not understand the T. I Googled it. I still didn't quite understand it, and I just didn't get it.
Yeah, well, that was much sooner. So I graduated college in 2005. I would say it was probably 2012 or 2013.
Okay.
With the doctor, Johns Hopkins, who was head of psychiatry. I forget his name. We've talked about him on the podcast, but he started saying we're doing such a disservice to people who have genuine gender dysphoria, and now we're affirming it and patting it on the head and saying, everybody needs to transition. So what was your initial intro to this? Was it your own confusion, or did you hear about it?
So I guess if the question is just when did I first learn about transgenderism and when did I first come across the word transgender, probably some point in high school. Maybe I was 15 or 16 years old. And I think maybe I'd heard of it. I knew what it was, but I didn't really care. And so I moved on, didn't think about it at all. And later in high school, I ended up identifying as a lesbian for various reasons. And that is when I finally placed myself on that LGBT acronym that I learned about all the letters on the acronym. And there's a lot more than just LGBT. So that was my first intro to it.
It shows how old I am that they hadn't added those letters yet. I don't think Q was even on when we were doing it.
No, we're old school. It was LGBT.
Yep.
That's it. So you're in high school, you're identifying as a lesbian. I have relatives who identify as homosexual, and I would say they're like old school, like from the 80s. And it's interesting because the older the homosexuals I've encountered when this comes up, the older they are, the more they're like, gender's important. Of course there's two genders. That's why I'm gay. Gender matters to me. It's not like we just have 100 genders. How did that lead to identifying as trans? What's that connection where all of a sudden the homosexual movement got involved with, you could be a different gender today or in a different one in a week?
So I think that whole thing actually started before the lesbian identity came on.
Okay.
What happened was when I was in high school, a lot of the people around, I just went to my local public high school over in Massachusetts. A lot of the girls around me started taking birth control the minute they started high school, which means that, they're able to be sexually active, or they're saying that they are, or whatever it is, they're taking the birth control. That was pushed in a certain way that, when you get your first boyfriend, you start on birth control. That was pushed by family members. It was just this idea that keeps girls safe. So it was well-meaning people just coming to the wrong conclusion. And I had no interest. I was 14, 15 years old when I had my first boyfriend. Very, very innocent relationship. We just played Xbox together, barely talked because it was too awkward to actually talk to a boy or a girl in person. So, it was at that time that I was being told, well, now it's time to take birth control so that if you end up having sex with somebody, you'll be protected in a way and you won't become pregnant. But I had no interest in sex at all. I didn't even have any interest in kissing anybody. It was not anything serious. And that made me very uncomfortable. And I started thinking that maybe to be a woman, as I'm growing into womanhood, I'm 14, 15, almost 16 years old, to be a woman means that I have to be pleasing to men in a sexual way. And that kind of turned me off of that whole thing. And I thought, well, maybe I just don't like boys. And if I'm not interested in the same thing that my classmates are, or that it seems like all the adults are telling me that every other 15-year-old girl is interested in, if that's not me, maybe there's something wrong with me. And I came on the lesbian identity because some girls at school, I think they were just a year older than me, they said there's a test to figure out if you're straight or gay or bisexual or anything. They said all you have to do is just look around the classroom and look at all the boys in the class, one by one, and think, could you see yourself sleeping with them? And I looked around the classroom, looked at all the boys in the class, and I said, no, I can't. I cannot see myself sleeping with any of them. No offense to the boys. Just
With all due respect.
just wasn't there yet. And they said, oh, easy then. That must mean you're attracted to girls.
Gosh,
so I was like, all right, that makes so much sense. Now I'm a lesbian. And when I rolled with that identity for so long, I was, slowly making...
How long are we talking?
Probably 3 or 4 years before I decided and I came upon the transgender identity.
Okay.
And this is kind of interesting, too, because right now what you're describing, the innocent, like you're a young teenager, the innocent relationship, it shows what a revolution the sexual revolution truly was, because for all of human history up until that point, that would be the ideal, the innocent, playful relationship. This would be what parents would want for their children, and what we would, that's what I would want for my children. You've got kind of the natural boy-girl relationship at that age, and you experience that exactly as we would all hope, and come to the conclusion, based on what society is doing, that something is wrong with you.
Exactly.
Yeah, not being promiscuous was like made you weird or something, or different.
And it certainly did make me feel like I was, like there was something wrong with me. Just because I had no interest in pursuing sexual relationships as a young teenager.
That's unbelievable. Did your parents know that you identified as a lesbian at this point, like mid-high school, late high school?
They did. They actually guessed it because I think they guessed it a little bit too early before I actually came upon that lesbian identity, because I was a tomboy for so long and I always wanted to wear boys' clothing or play sports, all this kind of, the stereotypical lesbian stuff. So my mom guessed it, and I think she might have been a little bit early on guessing it or something, but they knew. I didn't have to come out of the closet, so to speak.
Right.
Because it was just, I guess it was obvious. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so this is sort of end of high school, this 2 or 3 year period where you identify as a lesbian. What was the transition into the transition part?
That, I think, was just I'm identifying as a lesbian, but I didn't want to look or act gay because I thought it was kind of weird to be gay. So it would weird me out if
That's ironic.
Yeah. I am very confusing. I think I never really had my thoughts straight. Probably still don't half the time. But what would happen is I had a girlfriend, but I had no interest in holding her hand, no interest in kissing her. There's just nothing like that because I was like, no, gross, that's gay. I don't want to do it. But I was so sure of that lesbian identity because that I did the test that the upperclassmen had for me. And I mean, the test they said was conclusive. I'm a lesbian. So how could that be wrong? So I wouldn't want to hold anybody's hand. I wouldn't want to look gay or anything. And that was just causing me a lot of discomfort. And since I was already wearing the boys' clothing, here and there. Sometimes I would wear the girl stuff. I cut my hair a little bit shorter, and then I cut it a lot shorter. Actually, just about shaved my head, but I was wearing girls' clothing at the time. So I just looked kind of confusing, was clearly going through a hard point in my life. I was maybe 18, 19 at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, so freshman year of college.
So you're identifying a lesbian. You're not sexually active. You aren't really interested in having sex with women. You're obviously not attracted to any of the boys in your class. We don't know whatever happened to them, but I'm sure they're all great people. But what was the? Did you go to college after
Yes.
high school?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so what was that like? Was there ever a? Anytime anybody goes to college, my girls just went to college. I have two in college now, and there's sort of this reset mentally where they're like, okay, it's a fresh start. It's exciting. Who am I? What do I want to do with my life? Did you go through that and ever question, am I really a lesbian, or was I just listening to some stupid senior?
I absolutely went through the whole who am I thing.
Yeah.
But instead of, when I would question, am I really a lesbian, instead of coming to the conclusion of, oh, no, I actually, and this is true, I actually think that I was attracted to the boys, but not sexually, the way that it was pushed on me. And I mistook that for, I guess you could say, an envy of their bodies. And I was like,
Okay.
oh, I'm not a lesbian. I'm actually a straight man. And I mistook, and I think this is common in the trans community. It's a very confusing thing to try to explain, but it's almost like you're attracted to the opposite sex, but instead of realizing attraction is what it is, you mistake it for an envy of the opposite sex.
Okay,
it's
as you
a very
would for
strange
like a
thing.
car or a cool pair of jeans or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, I want that.
Yeah, it's very confusing to explain, to think about all of that, but I do think that's where it was. So when I would think about the lesbian identity and am I straight, I would come to the conclusion, I must be straight, because this gay stuff, it really kind of does weird me out. But I came to the conclusion on the wrong end of it and decided I am straight, but I'm a straight man.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if it gets any more confusing than that.
No, that
is-
actually makes more sense listening to me. But what year are we talking right now?
We are talking this is my freshman year in
College. Okay, well, so 2000.
Oh yeah, 2014 I started college.
Okay, because would you have said I'm trans? Like I want the male body, or you wouldn't have identified as transgender?
By the end of that freshman year, yes, I
Okay.
identified as transgender. At the beginning, I was just starting to think about trying on new male names, see how I like it, have my friends call me different pronouns, and see how I like it.
Because in 2014, I know we were not talking about that.
Well, I mean, you're hitting this right as it's about to go nuclear, though,
Yeah.
because the Supreme Court decision that legalized same-sex marriage was June of 2015, and then I feel like we're talking a matter of weeks, maybe months later, before Bruce Jenner kind of like became the mainstream face of it.
By the time I started taking testosterone, which I did, I took testosterone about 7 years while I was transitioning. That was spring of 2015. I don't remember when Bruce Jenner's whole thing came out, but it was either right after or right before.
It was right after, yeah. I think was he 16?
I think it was the second half of 15.
Second half of 15
I
after the
think so.
Supreme Court, yeah.
Yeah, so this whole time you're kind of trying out different identities, lesbian, transgender, different names, different pronouns. The people that you love, are they supporting you? Are they looking the other way? Is anybody trying to talk you out of it? Like, what's the reaction from the people who care about you?
Are you being congratulated?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things to talk about because I have a great relationship, still do, always have, with everyone in my family. And there was the slightest amount of pushback just because what's your knee-jerk reaction when you hear that somebody in your family is transgender and wants to transition? It's 2014. You've never heard of it before. Even 2015. You're kind of like, no, that's weird. And what my grandmother actually said was, can you go back to being a lesbian?
I'm sure a sentence your grandma never thought she would ever utter in her entire life.
She was already like, I don't know about the lesbian thing. And then I said, Graham, I'm not a lesbian. I figured it out. And she said, oh, great. I'm transgender. She said, can you go back to being a lesbian? It was right there in the car. That's when the conversation took
Were you
place.
were you raised with any kind of faith?
Yes, I was raised in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
Up until about 8th grade. I don't know why. My family, we just fell away from the church around then. And then I started going to the public high school, whereas before I was going to the Catholic school.
Okay.
So when we fell away from the church, we just fell away from everything because we didn't even have that religious school anymore.
Right.
We are doing much better now, I'll say. But anyway, I just want to talk a little bit about my family's support of the whole thing. They were apprehensive, we'll say, but when then all the stuff came out about Bruce Jenner and it was all celebrated in the media, and I was saying, I've done my research, I know what it is. My research was watching YouTubers talk about their transition.
Okay.
So that was the
interesting.
extent of my research. But I said, I've done the research, I know what I need, I know what we need to do. You have to just trust me on this. And because I was a tomboy and I did identify as lesbian, eventually they were like, hey, you know what? If you say this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do, and they were fine with it, they didn't have anything to go off of. I think that if the same thing happened now, parents could look it up and they would see all these different resources that say, no, this stuff is actually bad. There's detransitioners, there's all this stuff. But back then, there really wasn't. If you were just watching the media and taking everything at face value, you were seeing all this stuff celebrated, widely celebrated, everywhere. So
Now I want to later. I want to ask you about just how that, because you're. Well, I guess I'll just ask you now. You were, from our standpoint, early on in this, and I think in 2015, what Johns Hopkins put out is somebody who fully transitioned, all surgeries and everything. There were like 1,100 in the country, and then the amount that identified was, I forget what that number was, but obviously significantly more. When you just fast forward a couple of years after 2015, after Bruce Jenner, the numbers just skyrocket. And did you see, as somebody who early on identified as trans, was there ever a moment where you thought, okay, this is who I am, this is my identity, and I'm moving forward, my family's supportive, but I think that guy just wants attention. Like, it seems to be a fad.
yeah, I saw a little bit of that, especially when I would go to LGBT support groups. They had them for high school and college students mixed, which I thought was weird because you have 14-year-olds in there with 22-year-olds talking about sexual identity. But for the most part, everybody was about 18, 19, 20. So it wasn't that weird in the particular group that I went to. But I just stopped going because I'll tell you the story later. But it was a strange group. Anyway, I did think that what we should do for people who have gender dysphoria is make sure that it's a diagnosed thing before they're having surgeries. And I felt like if you were to take me, because the doctor told me I had textbook gender dysphoria, which is just a fancy word for discomfort with my biological sex and sexual characteristics along with it. So basically, the primary and secondary sex characteristics. Secondary is anything that would happen with puberty. Primary is genitals. And that's what the discomfort is usually based off of. And the doctor said that I had textbook gender dysphoria. So I'm thinking, okay, great. If this is a diagnosable thing, then we shouldn't just be giving double mastectomies to people who just identify as non-binary because it's nice to do that. But that is something that was going on. If you identify as non-binary, they will give you a double mastectomy. It has nothing to do with having dysphoria or having a diagnosable condition. And I did think that, but I also, what was more important at the time was I actually did not want to transition. When I went to the gender clinic, I thought, because I was told, that was the only option for treating the dysphoria, because they said the only known treatment of gender dysphoria is, I forget exactly how they worded it, but they said a combination of basically hormones and surgery. And I didn't want to do that. And I told my parents that. I said, listen, I don't want to transition. This seems like it's going to do a lot of damage to me, put me at risk for cancers. I've never had surgery. I don't want to have surgery.
So your concerns were physical health?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was just thinking, and I even told my parents, if there was a pill I could take to get rid of my gender dysphoria, I would. I would much rather be comfortable how I am than have to go and change everything. And I think some people really are in that boat with the gender dysphoria.
Right.
Some people are not, and they just kind of put on identities, and maybe it's a normal part of growing up, but we need to cut people's body parts off for it. But I did not want to transition, and I have heard that same idea from other people who, I don't want to transition. If there's a pill I could take, I would. So some people are doing it for attention, but it really is this disorder that is just treated improperly.
Yeah, which is what every sane person has been saying for a very long time. Of we are misdiagnosing. That's what the psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins said, and then of course they tried to fire him, but Johns Hopkins actually backed him up. But he said this is the fault of medicine. We're misdiagnosing gender dysphoria, which is a real thing, and we're telling people, oh no, get on the drugs, have surgery. How far along in that process did you get? Did you just say, I'm not taking any of this, I'm not having surgery, and that was it?
Oh no, I went full speed ahead into the transition, even after that, because I said it's my only option. What else am I going to do? So I started taking testosterone injections. What you have to do is you have to inject yourself with testosterone once per week. So every week you have to do a self-injection. They do give other options, but there are risks that come with the other options. I was a babysitter. I babysat little kids, got them off the bus, brought them to daycare, all this kind of stuff. Loved it. And they offered me testosterone gel so that I wouldn't have to do an injection. But if that gel got onto any of the kids, they could start seeing the side effects of testosterone.
Wow.
And so I decided that's way too risky. And there have been news reports of people who are transgender who their testosterone gel or estrogen gel, whatever they're taking, if it's a topical ointment of any sort, it could get onto the kids that they're watching or the kids that maybe their own kids. And it's very, very, very dangerous. So at least, even when I was not in the best state of mind, thinking that I'm actually a man when I'm not, I was still able to
Protecting
decide
kids,
I would
yeah.
rather do the injections than risk the kids being exposed to the testosterone, even if it's underneath my clothes or anything. If it's on my hands at all, I'll be all freaked out picking them up and everything. So I took the testosterone injections. I believe it was for 7 years.
Okay.
I had a double mastectomy a year into the injections, and I had a full hysterectomy when I was 23 or 24, I think.
So this happened fast.
Oh, yeah, it happened really fast.
Happened very fast. Going back, because you mentioned your family, when you start with the surgeries and the testosterone, were you letting the family, were you updating them, or was it basically you're trans and you're moving forward in this direction and that's the way it is? Or were
With my parents, with my immediate family, they knew all the steps because
Okay.
I lived with them. I was in college, but I lived in the same town as the college. So my parents, instead of paying for the dorm, or me paying for the dorm, because those student loans were not easy to pay off, I just lived with them and just commuted to school.
Okay.
It was around the corner.
Okay, so you're living with
easy
them during
peasy.
this whole time.
Yeah.
If at some point in this process, I'm anxious about the people who love you, and I don't want to call your parents or anybody in particular out, but if somebody had sat down and said, hey, look, would that have perhaps put the brakes on that runaway train, or were you going forward with it either way?
I don't know. Knowing me and knowing me when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, it probably would not have stopped anything because I was just, and probably still am, you can even ask my pastor, he'll say I still am, very, very, very stubborn. And it's not easy to get me to move when I have made up my mind. That's it. We're rolling forward whether we like it or not.
I would think, though, you would have to be in order to go through with all this.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a certain amount of, I hate to say fortitude, but determination of step after step. Because a lot of people would go, okay, no. I did the 2 testosterone injections. I'm out. I can't do this.
Yeah, not me. My husband actually, I think he joked and said, there's nothing more dangerous than a Katie with an idea in her head.
Oh, funny. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so during this time period when you're 22 or 23, are you dating?
Probably. No,
Okay.
probably not. No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
You're just transitioning. There. Okay. At what point did you mentioned that you're stubborn, but at what point did you question this isn't like were you happy? Did you say you were happy?
Well, I would have said I was happy.
Okay.
I 100% would have said it. And after I had the double mastectomy, the doctors would even call me back because they have to do surveys to see if the surgery went well, and then they could have all these statistics for, oh yeah, it's helped this many people and all that. And they called me. They stopped calling me after a year after the surgery, I believe. But they would call me periodically and ask, "Oh, are you happy with it?" "Oh, yeah, I'm happy with it." I would have answered them yes to all questions right up until I just wouldn't. And I don't remember the exact year. I know that I was on the testosterone for about 7 years, but I started questioning it after my hysterectomy.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I started questioning it after my hysterectomy, not long after my hysterectomy, I think maybe a year, maybe a little bit more than that. And even then I wasn't really ready to detransition because I was just thinking, all right, listen, I've made this huge mistake. And if I admit this, and I have just assured everybody in my family that I know what I'm doing, I've done my research, we're moving forward, I can make this decision, am I going to be trusted to make any decisions in the future? Saying, hey, I was wrong about this huge thing that has impacted me for the rest of my life, or that will impact me for the rest of my life. But you can still trust me to make decisions, I promise. That just felt like too much to do.
But you said when you realized you made a mistake, what was the... I mean, that takes... You mentioned being stubborn, but that takes a lot of humility. And I would think that would come in stages. Like, I don't know if this was right, but whatever, I'm here. I put in the work. I put in the money.
That came at first.
Okay.
Because I would text my friends, and I don't remember exactly. My friends probably remember it better than I do. But I must have texted a few times because I was listening to Bible in a Year podcast, Father Mike Schmitz. You guys probably know it.
Yeah.
I'm listening to that, and I'm listening to the Word of God.
How did all that come about?
I don't know.
Okay.
It came out of nowhere.
I know we're supposed to say the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, it's the Holy Spirit. That's what was some of my friends when I went to
all of a sudden, so you're transitioning, and all of a sudden, Father Mike Smith is on your iPhone.
There's got to be a step 2 in between one and 3 there.
Step 2 in between may have been that I was listening to Matt Walsh just about every single day while I'm actively transitioning. So I was probably the only transgender person listening to his podcast. But every single day I'm listening to him just hammer how bad this trans stuff is.
Were you... sorry to cut you off because that's... Are you listening because you're like, I hate this jerk?
No, I loved it. I followed Ben
crazy.
Shapiro for years and years, and then I discovered Matt Walsh, and hey, I like this guy.
Well, let's back up. Were you conservative? Like, was your family politically conservative?
I mean, I was transgender, so I wouldn't say I was super conservative.
know
But
that,
besides that, yeah, I was.
Yeah, you were.
Well, all right, I'm going to tell you a funny story now about that transgender support group.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I don't know. Are we getting that story on recording or off recording? So
I will tell you. So, because this kind of lays out exactly where I was with everything. So it was, let me think, the 2016 that was the first Trump election. Yeah. So that was the first election I was old enough to vote for president. I'd been old enough to vote a couple years, but there wasn't a presidential election. And I was dead set I was going to vote for Trump. And then I go to the trans support group the week after the election. It's the Monday after. And the prompt, what you always had to do, you would all sit in a circle. More people came to that meeting than ever before. I think there were probably 20 or 30 people in that room, where before we'd maybe have 10. So we're all sitting around in the circle. And the prompt, you state your name, your pronouns, and where you live. And after you state all that stuff, then they give you something. And that particular day, it was, you can just tell us how much you cried Tuesday night or Wednesday morning after you found out that Trump was elected president. And so they have this rainbow talking stick, and they pass it around. Naturally, it's a rainbow talking stick, and it is just covered in glitter. And personally, I don't know about anybody else, but I hate glitter because you cannot get it off of you.
Yeah.
We get cards in the mail with glitter, and I'm opening them ever so carefully. They'll be on display for like a day, but then I got to put them away, or in a Ziploc bag or something.
I've tried to ban glitter in my house. It hasn't worked. But
yeah, well, my mom did do a good job banning glitter when we were kids. She just said she can't have it on her when she goes to work. I don't know whether it was true or not, but she said it's not allowed, and we're not allowed to have glitter. So maybe you could try that.
Yeah, I'll try something.
Yeah. But anyway,
so you have this glitter
talking stick, and the facilitator gave it to the person next to me. So then I'm thinking, all right, I will just be second in line, and I'll just quickly say, all right, I didn't really cry, and then pass it. But instead, the person next to me passed it in the other direction. So I sat there listening to about 20 or 30 people, just one by one. I'm still crying. I cried all week. I just stopped crying. I cried for this many hours and this many hours. I couldn't go to work on Wednesday, all this stuff. And it finally gets around to me, and I was just dreading it. And I grabbed the talking stick, the rainbow talking stick, with just my thumb and my index finger, held it out as far as I could, because that's always how I held it. I did not want that glitter getting on me. So now I'm holding their cherished rainbow talking stick at an arm's length.
This is keep going.
And I said, my name, my pronouns, and where I'm from and everything. And I just kind of looked up. I looked at the floor and I said, I didn't really cry because I voted for him.
Oh my word!
And the room was
You have a lot of guts doing that.
The room was just silent. Everybody was staring at me. You could hear a pin drop.
Why did you say that? Though? Why didn't you just be like, yeah, it's rough, but maybe America will be okay, and just move on?
I kind of wanted
the reaction.
I wanted the
great.
reaction. I just thought, either I'm going to get kicked out or this is going to be the best story ever.
Okay.
So
I'm feeling both happen.
It's definitely the best story ever. Did you get kicked out?
I had to kick myself out.
Okay.
Nobody would talk to me. But I'm holding the rainbow talking stick. Nobody would come and get it from me. I never heard. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, but sometimes when I tell the story, I like to say, I never heard a room full of liberals so quiet.
That's awesome.
It was silent. It was absolutely silent. And I was just sitting there just for a few seconds. Nobody would grab the talking stick, so I put it down on the floor. I stood up, grabbed some snacks from the snack table, and just left.
So yeah, because
had to grab the snacks though. Because
okay,
I
why
was
did
taking
you?
testosterone, so I had more of an appetite, so
Okay.
I couldn't leave without my snacks. But
Why did you vote for Trump? Like, if somebody were to ask you, and not that they would even get into the weeds on that, but what happened to you? Because you're supposed to say, look, we're trans or we're gay, lesbian. He's going to round us up and put us in the camps, and he hates us, and he's a evil man, and he's the devil. That's the talking point.
that's a talking point. And Trump wasn't my first choice.
Sure.
It wasn't my choice in the primary, but he was my choice going into the general election, 100%. And it wasn't just a vote against Hillary or anything like that. What it was just, hey, I at least have a little bit of common sense left. He's not going to do this stuff. And you know what? You shouldn't just be infiltrating people's bathrooms anyway. So I don't care. And
And that was a minor topic back then. Now, 2020 and certainly 2024, he probably won the election because of the trans issue, because a lot of people were like, hey, I'm liberal, but...
There was the ad at the end of the campaign
Yeah.
where everyone was saying for Harris, I'm with her, and Trump is saying I'm with you.
She's for they, them, he's for
Yeah,
you.
that's right.
Yeah,
that's
And
right,
they
yeah.
blasted that on the NFL games last fall, or the fall of 24.
One of the most effective political ads that's ever
in
been
history.
aired.
Yeah. But back in 2016, that wasn't really on. I know for me, I didn't take it seriously, which is shameful because it just kept growing. And I think a lot of people, not that you don't want to deal with it, but like, you're like, isn't this like 82 people in our whole country, and not realizing this is going to take off. And it's once Hollywood and once the media basically says, we must affirm this or else you're canceled. It was long down that road before I realized, I think this is a problem.
I definitely thought that Katie listening to Father Mike Schmidt's while transitioning was going to be the most surprising part of the podcast. But between that, Matt Walsh, and now Trump, I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm trying to put myself in your shoes or think of somebody else. Like if somebody hated left-handed Irish Catholics and they ranted about it all day, I don't know if I could listen to that. I'm left-handed. But how did you? Were you just like, hey, I want to hear what the other side says, or were you sitting there going,
no,
that's true.
I was just always conservative, and then just fell for the LGBT lies, basically. But that only changed my way of thinking on one minor thing. Well, actually, it was pretty major for my life because I changed my whole life around.
I know.
But it was just the one, I was just deeply mistaken. Transgenderism, it's a delusional thought process where you're not seeing reality for what it is. But I was just always pretty conservative, more conservative than my parents, really. And one of the issues that actually really got me is the abortion issue. Because I was always like, listen, the side that says babies are babies is the side that's right about pretty much everything they say. So even though Matt Walsh was really hammering the trans thing, I was still stuck in the mindset of, yeah, but I'm diagnosed. I did it the right way. Everything's fine. And then it just came to a point where I was like, he kind of has a little bit of a point. Holy Spirit starts working. I'm thinking I should probably find a church. But then I go and I make the mistake. I'm thinking, well, I need a church that will affirm me. Well, those churches are ridiculous. That's less of, well, at least you're going to church and you're hearing the word of God, and more like Satan using the word of God to misconstrue things, we'll say it. So I didn't want to go to one of those churches, so I would go to just kind of your non-denominational church and just kind of go in, leave, go in, leave. I actually didn't know that when you go to a non-denominational church, it's not sacramental. So they would do the bread and, well, it's not bread and wine. It is maybe bread with grape juice. And I didn't know that they don't do the consecration. They don't have the words of institution, anything like that. So I would never go up and take it because I'm thinking, well, they don't say cross your arms for blessing, anything like that. Okay. I'll just stay in my seat. People are always like, why don't you go up? I said, I'm not confirmed in this church. I really shouldn't start partaking in the sacraments here. And they'll learn they're not even sacramental. I'm like, oh man, that adds another problem because the sacraments are real and all that kind of stuff. So
It shows you, that's really good formation that you do that and we're thinking about it.
Yeah, so then it was at that point that I decided, no, it was not at that point. See, I'm all mixed up a little bit here, but it came shortly after that I was thinking, I need a church, and it probably shouldn't affirm this transgender stuff, but it should be as conservative as possible so that, and small enough that I could have a community and people will know who I am. Now, this is me still kind of actively transitioning. I'm not sure how old I was at this point, but we'll say somewhere in my mid-20s. Okay. So I'm kind of actively transitioning, but getting ready to stop that. My friend even asked me, listen, if you could choose today, would you be Caden or Kate? Caden was my chosen name. She said, would you be Caden or Katie? And I said, well, Katie, easy. And then she said, well, then just do it. I said, no, I put too much work into Caden. I can't just do it. But anyway, then
Which is understandable.
Yeah.
You feel like you're trapped, even though looking back, it's like you're 24.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Your whole life's ahead of you. Yeah.
Right. So I decided I was going to go to the most conservative church that I could find in my area. Just wanted one right around my work. And I could just pop in on Sunday. I'll go for a couple weeks, and then we'll just see how it is. And I did. I chose a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod congregation it was right next to my work. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. I could get there if I had a shift on Sunday. I could still go to church. But I didn't want to go alone. So I kept asking all my friends, will you come with me? Will you come with me? Will you come with me? And they kept telling me no, but they were nervous to go to church. And do you know what they kept telling me? They told me this. They wouldn't let me in the doors of that church. And I wanted to rip my hair out and say, I am transgender, and I know they're going to let me in. I'm just nervous to go to new places alone. But I couldn't convince anybody to go. Since then, since I've moved from New England to the Midwest, I think some of them have started going back to church. One of my best friends certainly has. She found a good congregation over in the area. But I started going there, and I decided, all right, it's been a few weeks. I'm going to sit down and talk to the pastor. So I sat down, I talked to the pastor, and my whole point in going to that church was if I tell them that I am actually biologically female, whether they can tell or not, because I still have boys' haircut, boys' clothing, all this, testosterone effects and everything, that they would not affirm me in that. And they would call me a woman no matter what, because they're not going to lie to me. That was my whole reasoning for going. But I'm sitting down with the pastor in his office. We had about a 90-minute meeting, maybe an hour, talking about everything, talking about the catechism. Let's go over this. Let's talk about this, baptism, Lord's Supper, all this stuff. And I even told him, like, I'm not being, there's no rebaptism, so I'm not going to be baptized again. My first one's valid, because when everything fell apart on me, and I'm thinking, who am I? Am I going to detransition or stay the way that I am? The only thing that I had to hang on to was my baptism.
Right.
So I said, I don't know if I'm a daughter of God, a son of God, but I know I'm a baptized child of God. And that's all that I had. And I told him that. And then at the end of the meeting, he says to me, is there anything else you want to talk about? And I said, oh yeah, there's one more thing. I am actually a woman. And so he said, all right, let's schedule another meeting.
We're 90 minutes in, and
yeah, I didn't mention it.
We'll kind of shelve that and get back to it. So did you go back?
Yes, I did. I went back to him. We had meetings. It was either every week or every other week. He remembers it much better than I do because he had never been struck with that.
And he didn't know when he's talking to
He
you for those
didn't
90
know. He
minutes.
thought, I bet if he knew I was in my mid 20s at the time, because
Okay.
maybe I was, yeah, I could have been 26, something like that. If he knew that, he probably would have realized he's not just talking to a 16-year-old boy or something, because that's probably how I looked to him. But he didn't know how old I was.
Okay.
So he was just going along with it and was like, all right, yeah, I'm comfortable with this. Let's keep making meetings and talk. Is there anything else? Yeah, I'm transgender. All right. Well, we'll get back to that one next week.
That's right. You were saving the substantive stuff for the end. Okay, so you go to this Missouri Synod Lutheran Church. What's the next? When does it click that I am going to detransition?
That was gradual. So what happened at first was it was either the next meeting or the meeting after. My pastor was very gently suggesting that I should maybe just go by Katie at church. Maybe just be a woman at church, and I can still wear the clothes that I have because it would be expensive to change my entire wardrobe. But just try on your birth name and your pronouns. And I said, all right, but can I do it just at church? I don't want to tell my parents yet. I don't want to tell my friends yet because I'm just a little bit embarrassed. And he said, oh yeah, you can be anybody here. He said that. It was probably not like I could just become any person, but I think he was just trying to be very gentle and help me through the process, and so I did. And I said, all right, I am okay with being called Katie, my birth name, not my chosen name, just when I'm at church. And so he introduced me to a woman in the congregation who has become a dear friend to me since, as Katie. And every time that I would walk into church, she and some of the other church members and the pastors would, hey, Katie. Hearing the name Katie was like fingernails on a chalkboard. Every day I would go to church. I would park in the farthest corner of the parking lot I could find. I would just go, oh boy, all right, this is going to be tough because the minute I open that door, I'm going to hear the name that I hate. And so I would walk across the parking lot, nice slow walk across the parking lot, walk into the church, and sure enough, it was, hey, Katie, hey, Katie, hey, Katie. And I just hated it. And Sundays, I would not look forward to going to church except that I was going there to hear the word of God. If it was anything but that, I wasn't going to go. It was way too painful to have to go. And so yeah, every single Sunday, it was just painful until it just wasn't. I just got used to it gradually. I'm like, well, it's not so bad because I have to hear it every single week, so I'm just kind of getting used to it. And then I felt comfortable enough to tell my friends at work, to tell my family, to tell my friends and everything. And then at work, it was a lot of fun because then they got to joke, am I double trans or X trans? But then the HR did not want that conversation right in front of the office.
Enough with the X double trans jokes. HR disaster.
You're doing some work right now where you're working with parents who are going through children who are in the transition process. Tell us about that and what you've learned and what you think parents should know.
So when I first started telling my story, I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought maybe detransitioners would ask for help. I thought maybe transgender people would ask for help or just people with gender dysphoria. Hey, what's another option besides transition? But instead what has happened is parents of mostly adult children who have gone off to college, their children put on these transgender identities, and these parents are Christians, and like, what do we do? Yeah. Are we lying to him if we go along with it? So I have done, most of the time when I tell my story, it's to churches, small church groups, sometimes bigger church groups. And it's tailored for those parents and grandparents too. The grandparents, there's more questions that come with that. But they have asked me just amazing questions. They come to me a lot of times crying. Every time I tell my story, I say, I don't mind if you record when I am just talking. When I'm just up there blabbing about myself, talking about everything I've gone through, you can record it. But the minute the Q&A starts, you have to turn the cameras off because these people are asking very, very personal questions. Breaks my heart every time that I'm hearing the questions. They tell me their stories. And so I've started compiling resources, and I'm working with my church body on a resource that hopefully everything works out with it to answer all these questions, the most common questions that parents give to me, and give them a biblical answer. And we say, well, what did God say about this? And some of the stuff that they will ask, one of the biggest ones I think I get is, can a person really be transgender? Like, is this an identity that somebody can have?
Right.
And this is really what we should do? And the answer is no. Transgenderism teaches a false anthropology. People can have gender dysphoria, but you can't have a mix-up of your brain and body, because your brain's an organ. I can't just have the brain of a man.
You
And
can't
I think
ever actually become a man or actually become a woman.
Matt Walsh said it one time too, and I was like, that's what I say. I love it.
Yeah.
I love this. And then I just listen to the podcast even more.
It's yeah, because he did it's in your, we can dig people up and in their bones.
Yes, that's what he says. That's right. That's
of their male
the
or
Matt
female.
Walsh
And I remember
line.
hearing that and going, I didn't know. He educated, I think, a lot of people on all of this. And you hear and I want to ask you, somebody says, I mean, it's like when we deal with abortion or post-abortive women, or certainly an abortion worker, they're like, what do I say? And the first thing is, you don't say anything, you listen and you ask questions. And I would assume it's the same for somebody who identifies as trans. But then people are like, what do I really say? And there's all the, no, you're not, or you were not born into the wrong body, as sort of a conversation starter. I'm not talking about the person screaming, holding the sign saying trans people are real people, but somebody who's actually confused or
Right.
is trying to kind of evangelize you and say, look, I'm trans.
And a good example of it is some parents who, maybe people will talk to me too, but a good example of what you would say in conversation is, what about when your son is open to talking to you and he's saying he identifies as a woman, or vice versa, it could be your daughter, and you finally have a chance to talk, and you're afraid, you're walking on eggshells. If you say one thing wrong, this whole thing's going to explode. What do I say in those moments? And I have actually suggested to parents, and it's a suggestion because it's not something that I have tried, to ask more questions and to ask very gently, very open-ended questions, like, what do you desire about manhood or womanhood? Or what do you despise about your manhood or woman? Like, whichever way they're transitioning, that's the way that the conversation would go. And it just kind of lets them think about, oh, what do I desire? What do I despise? What am I, you wouldn't say it like this, but it would get them thinking, what am I running from and what am I running to? What is saving me? Because a lot of times it's a false gospel and it's saving you. Well, you think it's saving you, but it's not what saves you, because Christ is what saves you. And there's a whole conversation we could have about false gospels and all that, but that's a big topic,
Right.
and something that my husband would probably be better equipped to discuss. Open-ended questions like that. Another one that I think would be really important, if you had a chance to ask, is to ask, what does the end of transition like? When this is all said and done, what are you going to look like? What is your life going to look like? Because a lot of the things that happen in the transgender community is, there are a lot of very talented people in the trans community, artists and all this, who identify as transgender, and they will draw pictures of what they want to look like. So what I would have drawn for myself, I can't draw for any, I would have drawn a stick figure if it was actually me drawing. But if I were artistic at all, I would draw myself back when I was 19 years old. What does the end of transition look like? Well, I'm 5'2". I'm quite a little bit short. I guess I'm not too short. Maybe I'm close to average. I have no idea. But I'm kind of short. But I would have drawn, what am I going to look like at the end of this? I would have drawn maybe a 6-foot tall man with muscles and broad shoulders and all this kind of stuff. That was never going to happen. That is unrealistic. And in order for the trans person to even think about the question, even be able to start to come to an answer of what does the end of transition look like, they almost have to pull themselves out of this delusional thought process and think, oh, wait, that's not what my life could ever look like. I will be stuck on these drugs forever. I will have to have surgeries, and there are serious complications that could come along with surgeries. My height's not going to change. My bone structure is not going to change. Bone density might, but all that means is my bones could break easier. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that my shoulders will be any broader or anything like that. And then the other important thing when you are having a conversation with the person is that you just keep a neutral tone. You don't want to act too happy or too sad over things, no matter how you feel. And it is crushing. The parents' hearts are broken. Aunts, uncles, depends on where you live in the country. If you say aunt or aunt, I've learned.
Yeah, aunt.
But if you have aunts, uncles, grandparents, your heart is going to be broken. But a lot of times you just have to ask with a neutral tone, and you can't even expect that you'll ever get an answer. The trans person, or the trans-identified person, I like to say, because people are not really transgender.
Right.
You can't really live across genders or anything. But that person, the trans-identified person, might just get that question stuck in his or her head and just ruminate on it and come up with maybe an answer for him or herself, and maybe not. But it's at least something that could pull them out of that thought process, and that could help a little bit. The other thing that you can always assure people is even though they are suffering, you'd still love them. The door is always still open. People will kick themselves out of the house. Parents tell me all the time, they say, well, my son hasn't talked to me in years, or my daughter hasn't talked to me, and she's coming over for Christmas, and I think she's just going to storm out and stay at a hotel if we don't use the name that she wants us to call her. Actually, Christmas time is probably Thanksgiving and Christmas is when I get the most phone calls from parents, or texts sometimes, emails about, hey, this is coming up. It's always the same. I mean, it is very, very similar stories. There are support groups, and I'm sure they've come to find that their stories are similar to other people in the support groups. And so yeah, I always say you can just have these conversations, but just be loving, because even if this child wants to kick himself out of the family, that doesn't mean you close the door. Just because he closes the door on his end doesn't mean you close it on your end. And you are still to love that person.
And going back, that obviously didn't happen with you.
Right, yeah, that did not happen.
You said, I'm going to be embarrassed. I was wrong. I had to, and the sky didn't fall when you went back to your parents and said, I'm getting out of this?
No, my mom was kind of shocked. I think she actually gasped. She actually, and then I said, it's okay, I'll be fine. I am not sure, but my family members, maybe to spare me any, pain over it, I think that they did blame themselves a little bit, but I've assured them it's not their fault. We all fell for a lie. We all did. And I was over 18 when I started the whole transition. Or maybe I was 8. No, I think I was 19. So I was old enough to make my own decisions. And
there's probably very little they could have done. I mean, besides saying something and all that.
Yeah, I know.
You don't know how that's going to go.
They're going to have a daughter as stubborn as me. There's only so far they could take things. Maybe they could have talked to me in the same way that I encourage parents to talk to their children and gotten me to think a little bit more about the process. But it's also possible that just wouldn't happen.
Right. Let me ask you, as far as a detransitioner, because we work with a lot of former Planned Parenthood workers or abortion workers and post-abortive women. And I would say that the vitriol to those people from the abortion industry has lessened over time. It used to be you had an abortion and you regret it. Yeah, you're out preaching and giving your story, but hey, you had the option. Get over it. You got religion. Get over it. You just feel guilty. You shouldn't feel guilty. Or certainly the workers, they would go after them. But I think there's an openness. I know Abby Johnson's helped hundreds of workers leave because they've heard something she said and they're open to it. Is there an openness from the current trans movement for somebody like you, or are you just a complete sellout? You got religion, whatever.
There's no openness to it, unless I am just a detransitioner who will admit, as they'll say, if I will just admit that transgenderism is good, but I was never really transgender in the first place.
But that's the cardinal, what you've said a couple of times on this podcast is the cardinal sin, which is there's actually no such thing as a trans person. There's people that identify as trans. You're out. I mean, that you're just a heretic once you say that. And so I would assume you are hated by some folks.
And the funny thing is I do not hate them.
Right.
I feel more connected to them, more love for them.
I don't know anybody who hates a transgender person.
Yeah, because you just kind of see them and you feel bad. You're like, this is a very sad thing that you're doing to yourself. I actually want to love you in truth. I don't want to lie to you, and I don't want you to harm yourself, because it is self-harm.
Well, it's interesting to me, this is going back a little bit, but something that seems to be a little bit of like There's a lot of heads I win, tails you lose to this. And I was intrigued when you said that you never wanted to transition, but you did because you were told it was the only way. Because in the sort of the public discourse, we hear a whole lot of these trans patients are telling us that if they can't transition, they are going to kill themselves. And that wasn't coming from you. Perhaps that was coming from them. And then that's the only alternative, because any other alternatives, they put a label on called conversion therapy and they try to ban it.
Yeah. So, and actually on the suicide thing, I think that is ridiculous. There is a higher suicide rate among populations with mental illness, which gender dysphoria would classify as a mental illness. It's a delusional thought process. You come to hate yourself, your body, everything about you.
The
Of
name,
course.
when you said I hate that name,
Yeah.
I would have never thought of that.
You hate everything about your identity. Yes, you're going to be depressed and anxious and possibly suicidal, or at least you'll have some thoughts of suicide. A little bit of suicidal ideation, and a little bit can go a long way when it comes to something as dire as suicide. But it's not transition or die. There's no such thing, because you wouldn't say that about anything else. And you want to treat the person who maybe is at risk for suicide, who is feeling depressed. You want to treat them appropriately.
Yeah.
If they need medication, if they need something to help themselves, they need therapy, they need inpatient hospitalization, whatever it is, you have to help them. But you don't just say, all right, we'll give you whatever we want because you say you'll kill yourself if you don't have it. We don't do that for any other medication. I can't just go demanding any sort of drugs I want and then threaten to kill myself and expect to get it, and they just send me home. I just displayed that I'm mentally unstable, and I'm demanding drugs or I will kill myself.
It's the only movement that's put that as number one, like this or else. It's not, or you're a hater or you're a bigot. It's that I will kill myself if you don't accept this. Riley Gaines has the famous story now of the locker room where all the girls voted that the guy who's identified as a girl shouldn't be on the swim team. And so they vote it down. The coach feels bad. The coach brings in the trans person, and he says, if you don't allow me on the team, I'm going to kill myself. And, of course, all the women feel bad, and so they vote him, and he's allowed on the team. And it's just that the weaponization of – I've never seen an entire movement say, we must do this or we're going to die.
Yeah, because I don't think there is any other movement that does it.
It falls into what you've said about self-harm, though. Suicide's the ultimate self-harm.
Absolutely, it does. And the thing is, the pain that somebody feels when he is struggling with gender dysphoria can be a debilitating sort of pain, not just physically. You can be in physical pain if you're changing your body in certain ways, and but the mental anguish that you have to put yourself through and the emotional pain that you put yourself through, you are suffering when you are battling gender dysphoria. But it will get worse if you do the cross-dressing and you do the name and the pronouns, because now you are conditioning yourself to need this and to desire this.
Like a drug.
And you're shaping your desires. And now it's kind of like a person who's going through maybe addiction or addiction recovery, where now you're having to rewire your whole thought process because you're just searching for this. They'll call it euphoria. Gender euphoria is you're searching for these blissful moments where you don't feel the dysphoria. It's not really euphoria. It does feel, because I've had it before, when you have surgeries, when you start hormones, every step in transition feels like this drug-like high. But I think what it actually is just the absence of the pain that you're feeling. And so you can compare it to addiction, and I have many times. But on the other side of it, you have this affliction, you have this mental illness. Guess what? We live in a fallen world, and we all are going to suffer in different ways. And we can't just try to change the entire world around us so that we suffer a little bit less. Sometimes we just suffer.
Right. That's very beautiful and well put, is that sometimes we just suffer. I know listening to you and hearing other testimonials like this, but meeting you in person, you're so good at articulating all this and also explaining it to show, obviously the emotional part and the suffering is real, but how complicated this issue isn't. Yeah. And I think the simplicity of it, which doesn't really apply to a lot of other issues. But your story from the first, like, hey, which guy would you want to have sex with? None of them. Okay, this is your life now. Just from these steps and this is why I think that, and I'm interested in your opinion on this. It may be different. I feel like the trans movement has peaked, and it's starting to sort of go down, mainly because of their aggressiveness to go after children, which I think is a mistake in any movement. And the homosexuals started that a couple of years ago. They got everything they wanted. They got gay marriage. They're accepted in employment. They're celebrated. We have Pride Month. We have all these things. And then it's like they got greedy and said, no, we're going to read to your kids, and you're going to applaud us for it.
Well, they almost have to, because if you can be born with the wrong brain, I guess they would say, or the wrong soul, I think is how Bruce Jenner put it. He has the soul of a woman, I think is how he worded it. If there can actually be a mix-up that way, what would be the best thing to do is an early diagnosis and intervention. Because then you wouldn't be stuck with the effects of puberty.
That's interesting. So the natural step is where we're going to go after the kids, because, half the kids are gay. And we just got to help them along the way.
So yeah, they have to go after the kids. There's no other way to do it, because if they can't go after the kids, then they have to admit that something's going on here. And if we can't diagnose it early and intervene early, then all of their arguments can just fly out the window. The whole born this way argument can just disappear, which isn't a good argument anyway, because no matter which sin you're born with a tendency to commit, the answer is not to fall into that sin.
Right. How do you think this ends? I think just on a cultural front, I feel like this is a strange thing that many people were led astray in and supported, and that in time, common sense will take over. Even Matt Walsh, he's probably the most negative person on the planet. We love him to death, but you're just like, okay, I got to put on some nice music or something, cheer myself up. But he thinks, 50 years, 100 years, this will be that really weird thing that we did that one time, I think is how he phrases it. And I've started to see that because the experience of it, like what you said, how does this end? When you transition, it never ends.
Right.
You're just constantly chasing it. And so...
when you do get to a point, and this has happened to people, and I think is even what happened to me, when you get to a point in your transition where you need that next high, but there are no more surgeries. You've already been taking the hormones. That doesn't give you the same high as it used to. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You just have to live with the dysphoria, because all it does is get stronger when you feed into it. And you feed into it by playing around with the transgender identities. You play around with, you feed into it when you do the cross-dressing, when you engage in that. And some people will say, maybe I just cross-dress once per month. Well, once becomes twice, and then it becomes once per week, and then twice per week, and then 3 times per week. And now the pain, the emotional pain, is too excruciating to not cross-dress 100% of the time. And that's exactly how it goes for a lot of people. And then that gives you the high, and then, well, what's the next step? Well, now I'm going to do it 100% time. I'm going to go out in public wearing the men's or the women's clothing, whatever it is. And now I'm going to start on the hormones, and now I'm going to get the surgeries. And there does come a point where you run out of things.
Is there a point, just looking at the spiritual part of this, of, the basis of a Christian is that our life is not our own, and what we desire is really irrelevant in the scheme of things? There seems to be a lot of taking oneself extremely seriously.
Yes.
And that determination that I want, therefore I will have. And anybody that gets in my way, we do this with all sins, but anybody that gets in my way, I'm going to, get rid of them or ignore them. There's a lot of focus on self.
Yes.
Is that, you said you were stubborn, but was there any self-awareness, do you think, with people now, where you kind of step back, having detransition, and go, you're just in your own head. You're just thinking about yourself too much.
And that's exactly what it was for me. That is what it is for trans people, or for trans-identified people. They are in their head too much, and they're constantly thinking about themselves. I did the same thing. I was always thinking about myself. I never stopped to think what I was doing to my sister. I have one younger sister. We're just 2 sisters in my family. That's all. And what I was telling her, if I was transitioning when I was 18 or 19, she was 16 or 17. And I was then telling her, you don't have a big sister anymore. You have a brother now. And I don't think I ever used those words explicitly, but that's the message I was sending to her. What does that do to a 16-year-old girl? I didn't care. I didn't even think about it. I'm sure if I would think about it, I would have cared, but I couldn't care enough to even think about what message I was sending to my little sister. What is my role to her? What's my relationship? What's my vocation here? Didn't care. Just tossed it all out the window and said, nope, you don't have a sister, you have a brother. And that's that.
I know we're wrapping up, but how'd you meet your husband?
Oh, I met him in Indiana. I went to visit the seminary in Fort Wayne to look at, they have a deaconess program.
Okay.
And I gave a talk, a fireside chat it was, basically to tell my story and to answer questions to people who would be future pastors, all the men there. And some of their wives came, and some deaconess students, they came. And I met him in the chapel at the evening prayer service right before the speaking event that I had.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. That's
And then I was just, well, I noticed him from across the room, but he did not notice me. And I actually noticed him because he was wearing a bow tie. And I was like, oh,
Hey,
I think that one's going to be my husband. I actually
classic.
did think that. But
that's great. That's really great. Okay.
And I was right because, again, Katie with an idea in her head, I knew
I don't know how to say this. We're getting married. Anything else you wanna share with our? First off, thank you. Not just for your courage, but you're very gifted in explaining this, and talking to parents. I mean, I'm just so grateful there are people like you out there that are, because so many, it's like not every woman's supposed to go out and talk about her abortion, or every abortion clinic worker, but the ones who are called to do it and do it. I mean, you are helping, I think, save so many souls from the pain that you went through.
Well, thank you for having me on here. Anything I want to say to people, I think I do like to speak at small church groups. And I think that's where I do the best because people are able to talk to me individually, mostly about their children. Though there was one event where some young girls did come and talk to me a little bit because their mom brought them to the event. And that stuck with me. I really liked meeting those girls. I think that my talk helped them a lot. Their mom actually even emailed me after to say thank you for spending so much time with them. If anybody listening is a member at Lutheran Church Missouri Synod congregation, I'm sure their pastor could get in touch with me somehow. And
How do they find you? Do you have a website?
No, I don't have a website. I know I need one. I'm just slow to make one. I don't have a website, but if you're in the LCMS, it's easy to track me down. If you're not, my ex is Katie1080, and that might be the best way to reach me now. If I do have a website, I will make
Twitter.
it known
Okay.
somehow. Maybe I'll put it on, X, formerly known as Twitter. Maybe I'll post the website on there or something, but I am working on that.
Great. Wonderful. Wonderful. Any closing comments from you, Mr. Carlin?
Just thank you. We, Beth introduced us by email and had no idea whether there'd be anything that came out of it. But I'm so glad that you flew down here to Texas and shared everything with us. And I hope our paths continue to cross.
Me too.
Absolutely. So please follow Katie on Twitter. And also, if you have any questions that we did not address, we may have to get you back in studio because there's a lot here. Please email us at podcast@40daysforlife.com, podcast@40daysforlife.com. Thank you, Katie, for your faith, for your courage, for your example. Please rate, review, and share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.